All right, so today I'm going to go over my Glock 19 Gen 5 that I have here. And kind of ironic, it's my preferred firearm of choice as I'm going to be disassembling it on a VP9 uh, mat in the background. But I like the Glock platform. The fact that I can find parts, OEM, not OEM, for basically everything, the slide, the frame, magazines, barrels, aftermarket parts like comps and magazine extensions. I mean, you name it, I'll be able to find this stuff if anything ever happened and I ever needed parts for a certain weapon system. That's kind of why I say the Glock platform is the AR-15 of the pistol platform. So there's just so many parts for the AR-15. That's why I pick an AR-15 as my main carbine, and I pick the Glock for my main secondary. So I have a lot of other pistols, and I've tried a lot of other pistols, and there are certain ones that I'll use in different scenarios, but for the most part, a 9mm will do everything most people need. So 9mm is sufficient for me. Sometimes I want to carry a 357 or a 10mm, but those are just kind of special occasions. And 9mm hollow points, full power loads, self-defense ammunition. If you need some lead cast or, extreme penetrators for something a little more serious, you can use that too. So that's kind of why I picked the Glock 19, Glock 17. Glock 17 is technically my duty, or uh, you know, my outside the waistband carry gun, and I'll inside the waistband a Glock every now and then, but probably about 30% of the time I like to put a Glock 19 with magazine extension and a sidecar and stuff, but it's not as comfortable as a subcompact. So anyway, this particular model is a Glock 19 Gen 5. I do like the Gen 5 platforms over like Gen 3s, Gen 4s. I understand you can find more parts for Gen 3. Don't really understand Gen 4, and then they made some improvements. And on the Gen 5 platform, you could argue they went backwards, but to me, they make small improvements. Just Glocks are really reliable, and like I said, just the availability of parts, aftermarket parts, is basically unmatched. So anyway, first thing you always want to do is make sure that the weapon is safe. Weapon was loaded. We'll see if it was chambered. It was not chambered, and you always want to point the weapon in a safe direction. You can pull the trigger, and then you can take the slide off from the frame by engaging your takedown levers, and then you have your frame, you have your slide. Some people call it a lower, some people call it an upper. This is a Glock 19 Gen 5 MOS, and instead of the factory OEM MOS plates, which aren't the greatest, but they do work, I opted for a CH Precision RMR mounting plate. And if you get an MOS, I do recommend these. They're much more durable than an MOS plate, but man, I think on a good day you might be able to find them for like 60 bucks. So it's definitely an up cost to the MOS. You could just get your slide milled and reanodized for like, I think like 100 bucks nowadays. So that's technically another option, another good option there. So because a direct mounted optic is, to me, is superior to any optics plate in my opinion. So I put instead of an RMR, I cheaped out, went with HoloSun HS507. These are pretty much the gold standard when it comes to like cheap optics you are willing to put on like a duty or carry gun. Uh, you know, I think they've been tested. You can pick up the like 407 series if you're just looking for a dot for much cheaper. To be honest with you, I don't even use like the circle dot and all that other stuff. I just use a regular old dot now. So I usually go with 407s now because they're cheaper and I don't really utilize the other functions and stuff. So I'm at the Shake Awake's nice solar panel, side mounted battery tray. Gets pretty bright, pretty clear. Nice window size. I mean, you can't really ask for much more out of a pistol optic. Paired it off with a set of Trijicon suppressor height night sights, and you don't really need night sights in my opinion. I mean, I don't, I don't, I can't think of a time I've ever utilized night sights. Indoors, outdoors, other than just doing like some cool guy stuff around the house, but nothing with real world application. So I actually prefer probably like a blacked out rear and a night sight in the front with like a orange circle or something, or even a fiber optic. Fiber optics are not going to be as durable as regular night sights and stuff. So um, I've really tried to keep most of this OEM, other than a few parts. I mean, obviously that's not OEM, sights aren't OEM, but as far as the internals go, I really try to keep it OEM. Dual captured recoil spring, it is OEM. And then I changed out the barrel to a Safiri Precision Glock 19. It's actually said it was a Gen 5 barrel, but you should be able to run Gen 3, Gen 4 barrels. The locking lugs are exactly the same on those generations, and that's really what you're looking for in compatibility, that and the size recoil spring. But the length of the recoil spring is the same for those models, but the dual captured is new to the Gen 4 and 5 Glock 19. So but anyway, this is titanium nitride coated. It's got about 3,500 rounds through this, and I'd say it looks pretty darn good. A little bit of the coating's worn off, but overall, the wear on the inside is really, really minimal. You'll get wear on the hood right here where the hood of the barrel, that's what we call the top, slides on that slide right there, and it locks back up as it goes back into battery. And then there's a little bit of wiggle, but it isn't bad. Like if there's a lot of movement in the barrel slide lockup, it's going to affect your accuracy somewhat. So something to kind of keep in mind. I did opt for a threaded barrel because I went with a comp. And this is an Arc Division Spark G5 V2 comp. Single port comp. It's been really good. Don't have a whole lot of rounds out of this yet. Probably like 1,000 of different types. So far it's cycled 115 grain, like just range ammunition, 124 grain NATO. I think like 135 grain critical defense. I think it has some critical duties through it. Some Sig Sauer V crowns. Cycled everything very well. No issues whatsoever. So I do quite like the comp. The only downside is that you have it's set screw threaded. So I'm not a big fan of set screws on the bottom. You will make indentations on the threading of your threaded barrel. Not a big deal. I'm kind of like a clean freak and OCD about it, as you can tell. So comps are more or less made to be more permanent than I probably make them. So I do put Loctite on it, and I just torque it down a little bit more. But some people Loctite the threading on their actual barrel to kind of give it a little more securement, but you can see that's on there pretty tight. So, and then you do have to time it. It times pretty well with the OEM slide. You can see it matches up very well with the beveling in the front. It is pretty nice. A little bit of a gap there on the bottom, but overall it's been a good comp. And just an 18-pound OEM recoil spring, it's ran just fine for me. So all right, so 3 seconds punch. Just looking through the camera doing that for a second. All right, so Gen 5 backplate. Gen 5 backplates will have a larger cutout on this right side. Like they're almost symmetrical, but not quite. This one's just a little bit smaller. But in your Gen 3s and Gen 4s, you're going to have like a little step down for the right side of that backplate. Gen 5 backplates can technically be used on like Gen 3s and Gen 4s, but you can't use a Gen 3 backplate on a Gen 5. So it just needs a little more space open on the right side. So I have your firing pin assembly. I could technically take this apart. It's just really easy. You just push down on the spring, and then these two spring cups split apart. My problem is there is tension on this spring for your firing pin assembly, and the spring cups are really tiny. I don't know if you can see that, and then you can see there's just a little right there. It's split on both sides, and they'll split open. And they have to seat in there just right in order to put tension on the spring, obviously. So I've lost spring cups and had to reorder spring cups because I couldn't find them. So that is something just to kind of keep in mind. But it's an OEM firing pin assembly that I do hand polish. They changed the Gen 5 shape. Instead of round, it's kind of like, I won't say oblong, but it's a different shape. The actual firing pin itself, you can see it's cut diagonally there. But the only parts that I polish the whole thing, I take it apart and everything, just because. But really, the only part you need to polish is this area in the back right here, and this part right here. That's really the only thing that's going to make a difference if you polish it. And I always get this part, I just never really call it right. Things like the extractor, depressor, plunger. It technically comes out in two parts, but I just like to keep it together because it really doesn't do any good taking it apart, taking this little piece off. There's no maintenance that you would need to do to that. I've never had to replace a spring because it went bad or anything. It's just another part to get lost if you take it apart that way. I do polish this portion of the extractor, plunger, depressor rod, whatever the hell this thing's called. Doesn't do anything, right? There's just really, it's pointless. You don't have to polish that. I just do it because you can kind of see a little piece that sticks out like right there. So whatever. So next I'll push down on the safety plunger, and the extractor usually comes out a little bit easier, and you can see the direction the extractor is in. Right, you have these front teeth right here. That's what grabs the cartridge when it's empty, and it'll extract it and stuff. So this isn't the extractor. This is the extractor, and then there's the ejector. There are two different parts. I'll go over it. This is the extractor. MIM, cast, some people upgrade to billet. I have seen these break and stuff, so it could be something you may want to upgrade, but some people just like to keep things OEM. This is your safety plunger. So it inhibits the firing pin from moving past it unless the triggers pull back a certain length and stuff. So I do polish this. This is another part that benefits from being polished, but it's only the top cap of the dome. And honestly, I started polishing through here because this is where the firing pin will sit. So any metal on metal contact that you can polish, it should feel a little bit smoother in my opinion. So, but nice little polish. This one's a little bit harder because you have all these little tiny crevices. This side's smoother. This side will go towards your extractor, and this one will go towards your firing pin. So that's how you can remember it. And then you can take this little spring out, but again, there's really no reason to change out this spring. Some people like to put in lighter safety plunger springs in the like Gen 3s and Gen 4s to lighten up that trigger. You can if you want to, but it might affect reliability. So this is just an OEM spring and stuff. And that should be basically everything on your slide. Obviously I put the recoil spring back on. You got your barrel and everything. So we'll just leave all these parts over here, and we'll get to the frame now. This the firearm portion of the weapon. This is just a light, just taking it off. You got your serial numbers on the bottom right here. This isn't an actual Picatinny rail. This is a Glock rail or an accessory rail. It's just I think it's wider than a Picatinny, but I could be wrong. Maybe the Picatinny's wider, but you have your serials on the bottom. And then if you really wanted to match serials, you have it on the top of this other side right here, right? You'll be on the slide as well, but you don't have to have matching serials on your slide and your frame. But you could check serials just to make sure the weapon was complete to begin with. But honestly, if you get unmatching serials on a Glock, it's probably fine. It probably runs just fine. It's not like they hand fit the slides to the frames for individual Glocks. They're meant to throw a bunch of parts into a bin of like all these same parts in different bins, but like a ton of them, and put them together. You're supposed to be able to do that with Glock. Anyway, your frame, I've actually mostly turned everything back OEM on this frame. I mean, everything from the magazine catch, the trigger assembly pin. That's your trigger pin. This is your what is it, trigger housing pin, something like that. This is your trigger housing. Anyway, went back to OEM almost everything on here. The only thing I think I'm going to change out will probably be the takedown levers. I do like them extended. I don't think that does anything to the functionality of the weapon system. So punch out this back pin first. This is a 2-pin design, and then I'll punch out this pin here. So some people say you want to push out pins going from the left side to the right on both sides. I don't really think it matters. So I think maybe the manual says that. So if you want to follow the exact directions, that's I think what you have to do. I do like to push my punch pin up a little bit to get the locking block out. That's an OEM locking block. Again, it is polished to a nice sheen, and I polish everything. The only part on this you would have to polish would probably be like right through here, and you can polish these rails and stuff up here, but you don't have to polish the whole thing like this. You got your ambidextrous slide stop slide release. This is how it would be facing if the gun was pointed with the barrel in the right direction. And you can see the cutouts go on the bottom. It's OEM and stuff. First generation have ambidextrous slide stop slide release. Not a big innovation, but it is there. Then you have your whole trigger assembly. It's your trigger bar. It's where this rides up on the safety plunger. When you're pulling the trigger, pull it back, and it'll disengage that firing pin at a certain length. This is your cruciform on your trigger bar. This will be riding around the connector and stuff, and your firing pin assembly is going to be riding up on this and stuff. So this is your trigger housing. Gen 5s are a little bit different. I can actually take this out, but it's not the easiest to get back in. But you'd push that down and hold on. I don't even remember how to do it actually, but you can get this out. Interestingly enough, I did take it out at first, and I did polish as much as I could on these surfaces. Wasn't easy, but the reason I polished those surfaces is because that will ride in there, right? There's a little bit of metal on metal contact on that, so I do polish that surface. And this is your ejector. So that extractor grabs onto the brass, and then as it's going back, the back of the brass hits that and ejects the round. That's how that works. This part right here. And you can take it out and change it. Some are sharper than others. You just pull it out with like a pair of needle nose and stuff, but I'm not going to cheat today. And this is your connector. You're going to take out your connector. A lot of people like to change out connectors. That's probably I would say the easiest part, but like you have to disassemble the frame to get to the connector. So it's not hard, but it's not like changing out a barrel or anything. It's a dot connector, so you'll have different types of connectors. You have a dot, you have a minus. Those are all OEM. There's like some really heavy connector and stuff. There's a whole different sorts of connectors, but dots and minus connectors are the good OEM ones in my opinion. So I think that's about it. That's basically everything that I could take out. I could take out the takedown levers, but again, another little small spring. It wouldn't be hard, but you push down that spring. Getting it out's not the hard part. You push on lever one way. Anyway, it's getting it back in that's kind of the hard part. So not that it's all that hard, it's pretty simple. And then for the magazine catch, what you would need to do, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it in there. You have like this metal rod, and that's actually a spring that's caught into a little cutout on your magazine catch. And it's on the other side too if you want to switch it around, because it is ambidextrous. But you can see if I can engage that, and you can kind of see how that works. So you got to get that spring all the way over on this side. It pop out, and then you got to take a pair of needle nose pliers, pull out the spring, and then you can take out your magazine catch and everything. So that's how you would completely actually disassemble a frame. And I do polish these rails right through here, because that is what's riding on your slide and stuff. And this thing is clean, because I do really clean my weapon systems. So you saw me shoot it at the range. I took 700 rounds that weekend to the range and shot it through all my Glocks. I shared that ammunition through all my pistols, which the only ones I took were my Glocks, like I said. And then literally the weekend before that, I took 500 rounds and did the same thing. So I shot, it's not a lot, but 1,200 rounds through like 5 or 6 pistols is doing pretty good in my opinion over a course of 2 weekends. So anyway, I'm gonna put the connector back into the trigger housing. And sometimes, most of the time you won't have an issue, but there's supposed to be a certain distance. You're supposed to be able to like stick a piece of paper in there or something. I don't know. You'll be able to feel it if something's jacked up on that connector, and you might have to make a modification. But for the most part, you should be okay. Let's see if I can't get that on camera. So I'm catching this cruciform underneath that little lip, and I'm trying to get the cruciform in this little slot on the side, as well as kind of lighting it up with that connector where I'm not entirely sure what they call this like curved portion of the trigger bar, but that's what's riding on your connector, right? So that's why people change out their connector, because that'll make their trigger feel a little different. So now you got your trigger fire control group, I guess, all assembled. You could stick it back in your frame. Doesn't really line up. Like, you'll hear a nice snap when it's in. Like, you'll know when it's in. And then I like to put the pin in, the back pin in. It just makes it a little bit easier. And this pretty easy, right? If you're like OCD like me a little bit, you want to, get it nice and flush on each side, right? Now you're going to take your slide stop, slide release. I was trying to think of the name for it. Some people call it slide stop, some people call it slide release. I call it both. And you can put your locking block back in, right? You can kind of see the direction right there. Pretty easy. I do like to take this, the punch pin. I'll stick it in the opposite side, and I can kind of feed my other pin through. Makes it a little bit easier, right? I'm just even that out because I'm OCD, but it would work just fine. There. And your frame should be assembled. You could do a function check if you want to. You should be able to, you know, lock the trigger on the connector and release it. Typically, if you didn't have a comp, you would put the barrel back in. You don't have to do it this way, but I like to, because it gives me like a steady surface when I'm doing this. You take your extractor. Remember how it was? This rounded portion is going to go towards the back. Right? And just fit it in there. I like to hold it in with the side of my finger. And then you're going to look for the safety depressor plunger, or the safety plunger. And you see how there's that side for the firing pin on there, and then you have like a smooth side, like on this side. That's going to go towards the extractor. Right? You just push down on it, and it should hold itself together, but you don't want to like shake it or bump it, because the safety could pop out, and then if the safety pops out, your extractor is going to fall out. So put this rod, we'll just call this the rod. You want to stick it in metal side first, not the black and spring portion. You want the spring portion facing the back. And you would put your firing pin assembly together if it was not put together, and then you just stick it in. You want to make sure that the bottom is lined up on that slide. I mean, obviously it's not going to push in if not, but I've seen it where the firing pin's like right here. You could technically push this in. That would be a bad day. So it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but for some people it might be a headache. So if you were to put your back plate on, rack it and all that, you might have to finagle the slide and stuff a little bit to get it off, to do maintenance on it. All right, now that you got basically everything back together, you need to put back on your back plate. And what I like to do is I like just to like sit it on the back. You'll be able to start it. There's like, you know, cutouts that obviously the lip fits into, right? And you can take either side. Just the fat side makes it just a little bit easier to get started. I say that. And then you're going to have to push in your rod, right? This is the hard one, but it's not that hard. And then you just want to make sure it snaps. You'll hear a snap. Put your recoil spring, if you didn't do that already. I mean, there's your completed slide, and you can slide it back on and do a function check. If I can. Recoil spring. So what happened, right? This recoil spring was up on the next step. You could do that. Let's see if I can't. So it is up like that. It's not going to cycle if your recoil spring is on that third ledge. Sounds weird. It's actually kind of hard to get it on there, but you can do it. It can slip when you're putting that back on. So if it doesn't rack back like it just did, like you'll be racking it and it won't even get there. You'll get like right here, and you'll feel resistance. Don't force it. Just go ahead and take it off, because your recoil spring is probably like off center, or it's on that third ledge up there. So that's why we always do a function check. But try not to force anything. You shouldn't have to force anything with a Glock. So you can put it all back together. Just stick your flashlight back on if you got it. Function check. Trigger works. Trigger resets. I think it's a pretty nice trigger for a OEM Glock trigger. Resets quite good. Don't have my trigger pull gauge out here, otherwise I'd give it a pull. It feels about 4 pounds to me, maybe 4.5, so probably closer to 4.5. But so that's my Glock 19 Gen 5, and basically is about as much as you can disassemble with a 3/32 punch pin. Thanks for watching.